Ladies, gentlemen, and friends beyond the binary, welcome to Monday Discourse with me, Tristan. For today, July 12th, 2021. We're already coming up into the middle of July. Oh boy, this month's going by far too fast for my taste. Hi, I'm Tristan. I am the host of Step Back History and Tristan Won't Shut Up. I stream on Mondays and Tuesdays, Mondays from 12 till 2 Eastern Time with Mia Mulder, who unfortunately will not be joining us today. I'm sorry about that. She's taking a personal day. And Tuesday nights from 7 to 9 with just me. But this week it'll be all just me. I go by he, him pronouns. You can find my work at stepbackhistory.com or tristanwon'tshutup.com. If you wish to support my work, you can go to patreon.com/stepbackhistory, see videos early, and support ad and sponsorship free for as little as 84 cents a month with an annual subscription. And if you do sign up soon, my next video on climate refugees is going to be going into your feeds today for patrons. So do it. I'm going to be encoding the video right after this stream is over. Or if you have Amazon Prime for no extra cost to you, you get one free Twitch Prime subscription every month. And if you use it on my Twitch account, you help me out with a couple bucks. And it's at no extra cost to you. It's money that you've already spent. So if you don't use it on somebody, Amazon gets to keep your money. So I recommend you use it on some Twitch creator. And if you choose me, I'd be very grateful. As for content, my latest video is on Ruby Ridge and Waco still. Wow. 2 weeks ago today that came out. And my next video is on climate refugees and eco-fascism and stuff like that. So that video should be latest coming out on Wednesday. But for patrons, it'll be coming out today. So. And yeah, if you want to submit questions for this or future streams, I'm going to put a link in the chat. At the moment, I'm going to be running it like it's a Step Back Tonight. So I'll be looking for questions that are not for Mia, which at the moment, I have 0 questions that are not for Mia. So, yeah. So I'll be looking at the raw form to see if anyone can submit something that just I can answer. So that'll be good. What else we got? Yeah, if this is your first time watching, I know I've been getting a bunch of new subscribers in the last few days. You can what's it called? I've been getting quite a few new subscribers lately because we just a couple days ago passed 95,000 subscribers, and we're already getting very close to 96,000 subscribers. So, yeah. If this is your first time here, make yourself known in the chat. We have a very active chat community. People are very friendly, so say hello. I think that's everything, though, from my opening spiel. So, yeah. Let's see. Historical novels I read, sometimes the authors will stop the story to give a detailed description of something historical, like in the book I'm reading. The authors stopped the story to give a detailed description of how Roman slave plantations work. Would you find that interesting or annoying? I would find that annoying. I hate when, to me, okay, so, like, the thing is, fiction should always, like, have, like, world building is good in fiction, but world building that is done for the sake of world building and not for the sake of, like, pushing forward a story is pointless. And it's a waste of, it makes your story slower, sluggish, and harder to enjoy. So, like, unless the detailed workings of a Roman slave plantation have anything to do with the plot or with the story going on, then I don't see why you would do it. And if you do it, why don't you just, like, there's the whole show don't tell thing. It's like a rule of storytelling. It's like historical fiction and alternate history, the two genres where people can't just be bothered to learn how story works. They're so interested in telling you a setting that they forget that stories are supposed to be stories. What's it called? If I wanted to read a Wikipedia article, I'd read a Wikipedia article. I don't understand any type of fiction that treats itself like Wikipedia. Are you excited for the second season of Lower Decks? Yes, I am. Very much so. Lore is such a boring way to approach fiction. Like, when I find out, what I'm trying to remember was, like, how somebody said that there's a Wikipedia article, like the Star Wars Encyclopedia or Wikipedia or whatever, has a page for bread and stuff like that. And I'm like, why are we doing this? Or when I see, like, detailed lore videos of, like, The Handmaid's Tale or 1984, it's like, what's the fucking point of this? Like, the whole point of 1984 is that nobody knows anything about how the world works anymore because it's like a dictatorial nightmare that controls every aspect of your everyday life. And, like, I don't know. Like, I feel like in a lot of ways it misses the point of what it's trying to do. It's probably different if you're, like, looking at, like, video game stuff, because video game stuff or just game stuff in general, like, like, what's it called? My number one, like, creative outlet is dungeon mastering, so I have to make up and read a lot of lore for that. I have books on my shelf here that are just campaign settings, and the campaign settings are just a book of lore to be inspiration for stories and stuff like that. But for me, like, having a lot of, like, that kind of stuff is good and interesting, but, like, when you're trying to tell a story, a lot of times just, breaking from the story to just do a lore dump of a bunch of information that has no real, like, purpose in the actual story just feels kind of weird. If that makes sense. And, I always think of stuff like there was that, there's a chapter of one of the Song of Ice and Fire novels that is just a detailed description of, like, the families of, like, the Lannister family's territory, like all the sub-families underneath them. And it's just all their names and banners. And it's described as Tyrion's, like, assistant being like, all right, name all of these houses and what their things are. And they're just all, like, listed with their, with their houses. And it's just like, there's no, like, it's not used at all in the story. Or if it is, it's, like, only briefly alluded to. So it's just, like, this random lore dump in the middle of the story that makes no sense. And it's like, George Martin, just saying, your books are over 1,000 pages long. If you wanted to find some places to cut some flab, these kinds of chapters would be it. Just found your channel this weekend. Won't be able to stick around for a stream, but I wanted to hop in and say, like, your stuff. Oh, thank you much, Green of Bithynia. Does international sports encourage nationalism and racism? After we lost the football to the Italians, I heard my dad say "fuck greasers," which is some really old anti-Italian racism. I mean, I think that there's probably some smarter people who could bake into this, but I feel like, you know, obviously there's times where it goes too far, but a lot of times I think that, like, the competition that comes with sports is mostly harmless. You know, except when people use it to excuse, like, random violence and hooliganery. Like, British people can't ever be proud of their country, ever, because we know that no matter, even when it comes to sports, they can't do it without being violent. So they have lost that privilege. Germans, same. Anytime Germans become proud of their country, whether it's in sport or whether it's in politics, nothing good comes out of it. You get a world war, And there's a reason why England and Germany can't play each other in England or Germany. You got to control their fans. So yeah, it's fine. Guess I gotta congratulate Italy for winning the Euro Cup, just because I like to see it when England loses. So congrats. But yeah. But like I don't like yeah. I don't like I think that there's something kind of nice about like things like how we got I mean not this year, but like typically even though I don't watch the Olympics, I'm like happy it exists. It's a sign of some form of international cooperation and working together. While like, you know, it never pans out the way that you'd think. I'm at least like, you know, grateful it exists. Just for saying this about competition will be tracked down and assaulted by someone from Philadelphia. Yeah, Philadelphia is Philly probably needs to have like a quarantine zone placed around it anytime sports happens. So that's all. All right. Let's see what we got. Some people have submitted some stuff. That's for Mia. Okay, let's see. What's my opinion on the protests in Cuba? Do you think Cuba's current economic situation is more the fault of the blockade or the government? Oh, it's most definitely the blockade. I don't really... I've only, like, heard a little bit about the protests in Cuba. I don't actually know what the story is there. But I do know that because the United States is so invested in delegitimizing the state of Cuba that they're going to blow up how important these protests are to a huge degree. Even if they are legitimate, I don't know. I haven't, like, done the reading. But anytime someone's like, oh, look how bad Cuba is, I'm like, I'm already on the defensive. So we'll see what happens. But, you know, I had a busy morning. So I didn't really, like... take my time to go and sit back with the news, and I only heard about these protests last night when I was like right about to go to bed. When are you creating stuff as a dungeon master? Do you do D&D's official lore? Or do you homebrew stuff on your own? I typically read all sorts of different D&D settings lore to figure out what I want to put in my stuff. I don't just like use the Forgotten Realm. I do use my own. I kind of make my own setting that all my games are in. But I definitely use other lore from other types of things to build out my own sort of setting. For sure. But like, here's the thing: even though I like have a lot of lore in my setting and it's like built up very like extensively, I don't typically drop giant like blocks of lore on my players. I have it so that I can like the world can respond in a realistic fashion, and sure, if they're looking up something specific, they can find it. But for the most part, like I don't. Even though I have lots of like lore that I built up, I don't insist it upon people when they're playing in that setting. And even with my like quote unquote lore stuff, like for the most part, it's very vague. Like I know people who when they do lore stuff in their tabletop settings, they'll like they'll have like all of the kingdoms, and they'll have crests. And these people will have like multiple 1,000-year histories of everything. And I'm like, I don't have that. I have, like, just yesterday, I had to put a vague history together of a kingdom that has been around since 2017. So, you know, I've like had multiple campaigns take place in it. And even then I was like, I had to write down for the first time roughly how old it is. And like, that's it. And it's like, okay. So I typically focus more on what players are going to run into and what kind of culture stuff is going on. Because, like, I don't think anybody is going to want, like, the Westeros, Game of Thrones, politics-y stuff. So that's it. People are talking about Haiti. Yeah, I don't know what... I don't know what's going to be happening with anyway, if you don't know, the Haitian president was assassinated a few days ago, and some of the assassins seem to be what's it called? Some of the assassins seem to be former Colombian soldiers. What's it called? Former Colombian people, military people. So, be interesting to see where that comes out. Political themed D&D sounds dope as hell, though. Yeah, sure. I'm sure that it would be fun to do, and I've done it like in the context of a city, but I haven't done like I haven't, like, for example. So I got like a few places where I do stuff, and like I got like one kingdom that I know who the emperor is. Or Empress is, and she has a capital city that nobody in any of my games has been to, so I've never fleshed out the city. And I don't have that much history, except that they exist and that they are vaguely trying to push into a region that has, sort of like a kind of like a Siberia type region, and that's it for the most part. But I've done like, because also I have my players playing at actually a relatively peaceful time in this kind of area's history, so there's that. When I run stuff, though, I tend to make my games much more personal, and I guess I should say, like, the beginning of the one campaign took place in a city where 4 different houses were kind of vying for power, so that was a thing. Sort of like a Italian trade republic type situation. All right. Would we be more inclined to farm communally if we actually evolved to sustain ourselves that way? The Speculative Evolution blog I follow did a post about canaries farming snails, and they made a point of saying that canaries evolved to farm communally because that's more efficient for the species as a whole. I don't exactly know what you mean by communally farming, but, like, people communally farmed for a lot of our early farming history. I don't exactly know what you're getting at there. Yeah. To kind of bounce back and forth. The first like adventure in the campaign that I've been running since 2018, the first adventure took place in a big tropical trading city where, like, ships kind of stop before they make the big trip up north to sell, like, all of the tropical, spices and commodities and such. So it's where all the really big trading ships go up and down, and like a lot of smaller ships from the region come in to sell to those big ships. And the city is a trade republic run by 4 families, and the party stumbled into a plot by one of the houses to essentially puppet a second house because they assassinated the leader. And then when the leader was assassinated, her son took over, and her son was only like 8 years old. And so they were trying to puppet through the regency of that house by controlling the kid's uncle, who was, like, manipulating everything from behind the scenes. And yeah. And so That was the first. That was like their level 1 to 4 adventure. That was pretty fun. They ended up kidnapping that kid at one point and hiding him in a fish warehouse, and eventually ended up assassinating the leader of the evil family, and blah 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 blah. It was very fun. If the Islamic world was the one industrialized first, how would it impact Islamic marriage practices? Would we see polyamory become normalized earlier? I mean, I don't know if the Islamic world would have colonized in the same way, because like Islam, kind of like with Judaism, it's a little bit more proselytizing than Judaism, but it's still like they're not super like they don't like Muslim missionaries are like, you know, they exist, but they're nowhere as close to like the industry that Christian missionary work would have been. And so even if like a Muslim country got involved in colonization the same way the Europeans did, I don't think they would have been as invested of spreading Islam to those places. It still would have spread, but it wouldn't have been like as intense an export as like you would see in other situations. So yeah. Because like everyone, a lot of times when people think that like Islam spreads the same way that Christianity does, it's because they think every religion is like Christianity. When like you don't, one of the things you learn quickly is that Christianity is a particularly expansionist religion. Like it's that's sort of Christianity's thing that makes it kind of distinctive. A lot of other religions don't have a strong incentive to convert people. I was thinking more within social structures within Islamic countries, not colonialism. Well, the thing about polygyny in Islam is that it's very highly emphasized that it's only a thing that you can do if you have the means to do so. So, like, even in like the Middle Ages, unless you were pretty rich, you didn't take more than one wife. And you weren't supposed to take more than 4. And like I said, like that only happened like if you were rich. Or fairly often what happened is a lot of times people would have multiple wives, but like one was like the person that they married, and the other one, like they married them to like, you know, just so that they could like live in the house and share with resources and stuff like that. Like kind of like how in Europe, marriage wasn't always for love and reproduction. It was, you know, it had political and economic purposes, and in a polygynous culture like what happened in the Middle East and stuff like that, that also was also a thing. So a bit more complex than you know people want to make it out to be, but yeah, it would have been a lot more normalized, but still the vast majority of people would still have only one spouse, because even in the Middle Ages that was the case, unless you were very rich. Because like Muhammad even like writes a whole thing in the Quran about how you don't get married to more people if you don't have the resources to be able to take care of each and every one of them. I'm saying, are we bad at sharing land because we didn't evolve to be sedentary? Like, maybe if we'd have a psychological aversion to hoarding stuff like those hypothetical birds do. Thing is that that's very much playing the "but human nature" argument, and it's like, and also evolutionary psychology is typically bullshit. I don't think that we evolved to have a aversion to working together on things. We have an aversion to we have a pretty strong psychological urge to share things and think of things equally. It's only that we have these ideological structures that sort of artificially push us to to think selfishly and to think about not sharing. Like little kids. Maybe they have like a little solipsistic ego, but like, yeah. Do you think there'd be China? Do you think there would still be class-based exploitation in a world where industrialization didn't come out of Europe? I don't know for sure, but possibly, yeah.
if you think about Marxism, if you think about scientific Marxism, then yeah, I would make the argument that as long as you have people living off of the work of other people, you're probably going to have some sort of like class-based exploitation for sure. And that is older than capitalism. So industrialization, so very, very much like industrialization and capitalism was like a like extrapolating on something that had a process that was already been going on for tens of thousands or over 10,000 years. Caught the slide for the third time in a row. Well, lucky you, I guess. Alrighty. You're usually asleep at this time. Well, I don't want you to, stay up past your bedtime if that's going to cause you a problem. Do you think capitalism or something like it would have started in India or China? Really depends upon. I think China, but China had more of like subaltern. Like China had a lot more mechanisms that approached what you would consider colonization. And so I do think that China would have been a more likely candidate for capitalism to start taking hold. Because capitalism was born of colonization and exploitation, so you would have seen it. Thoughts on unrest in Cuba? I talked about it a little bit earlier in the stream already, but I don't know enough to have an informed opinion, but I do know that that one thing to be wary of is that the U.S. is going to have a very strong vested interest in making this this unrest look as bad as possible. So I'm sure that the primary thing is going to be trying to explain how the U.S. is going to use this to manufacture consent and try to justify invading or trying to push for regime change in Cuba, which is something they've been trying to do for, since the 1950s. Are right-wingers going to try and appropriate the protests? I almost guarantee they will. Love the channel, man. Can you make a video I can show my students? Also, can you make a video I can show my students? I mean, I've made lots of videos. I'm not sure what you mean by, can you make a video I can show my students? Also, can you speak to Christopher Rufo and his influence on CRT? Yeah, Christopher Rufo is the guy who kind of pointed out that the critical race theory, people freaking out about critical race theory, was an intentional project on the part of him. That was sort of this project to just sort of because critical race theory is a part of the academic left that was used to develop and understand racism and the racial inequalities that are systemic in structure. And they intentionally basically muddied the water to try and remove all actual meaning behind critical race theory and just turned it into right-wing word for thing that I don't like. And he bragged about being able to do that on Twitter. So yeah, like the whole like critical race theory having nobody knowing anything that they not knowing anything about anything and or not knowing anything about what they're talking about and just being a boogie term for boogeyman term for something that they don't like is fairly it was intentional. It is an intentional project. Because I don't know what's it called. I don't mean to push conservative darling George Orwell, but if you remove words from the language and get rid of and make these words have no meaning, then you really can't articulate new and suppressive thoughts. If the Chinese didn't give up their treasure fleet, would they have colonized Australia or the American West Coast? I mean, nobody can answer that. But if you were to look at what they were going for, the treasure fleet seemed more interested in trying to broadcast Chinese political power into the Indian Ocean trade network, which means that if anything, China would have probably, if they were to colonize anybody, it probably would have been either India or various places on the west coast or on the east coast of Africa. That would have been where their interests would have been focused. Because honestly, if they had gone to like the Americas, the Americas is a very treacherous voyage. Yeah. They might have found Australia or America eventually, but I think that their interest was more getting involved in the Indian Ocean trade network. What is your opinion on Tom Pooses? I have no idea what that is. Could you make a video for me by this time tomorrow, please and thank you? Oh boy. All right. Religious anarchy, based or no? It can be. It can be very based. What's it called? I remember I was at a talk with a bunch of Christian anarchists talking about them pouring the sugar in the gas tanks of a bunch of, like, clear-cut logging machines, and I was like, that's pretty based. The Lib Law podcast did a Q&A, and I asked them if anti-CRT laws will survive in court, and they said probably not. Are they still concerning regardless? I mean, they very much could. I don't know for sure. Is heat wave in step back region? We had our heat wave last week. Actually, we're kind of in a cold front right now. The last, it was probably early last week. It was very hot. And then this cold front came through, and now for almost a full week, it's actually been kind of cold and raining. It's been raining almost every day lately. And today it's only 20 degrees, so it's actually nice out. I was going to go for a walk, and then it started raining. So halfway through my walk, I went back home. Why sugar of all things? If you put sugar in the gas tank of an engine, it actually fucks up the engine basically. You can basically destroy in Roblox, I mean, in Roblox, if there is a vehicle that has a gas tank, if you put sugar in it, you can disable that vehicle. But I would only say do that in Roblox. Because in Roblox, when say the police are trying to chase down protesters and you have access to sugar in a gas tank, in Roblox, you could disable that vehicle with sugar. Yes. Would the Native Americans have been better off if Chinese discovered them first? I mean, I think that disease would have been maybe marginally better, just because Chinese colonization, it would still have been an unequal and imperialistic system, but I don't know how genocidal it would have been compared to European colonization, and how much focus on cultural destruction there would have been. But the main thing, the big thing that destroyed a lot of indigenous communities, is it was the disease, and China had the same disease as Europeans did, so they would have definitely have exported that particular fun aspect of the old world. Quakers tend to be very anti-establishment to this day. Shakers often lived in our actual communist-ish communes in the 1800s. Yeah. Not to mention, like, there was like a proto-socialist group called the Levelers, who were, or Diggers or something like that, in England that were actually pretty they were pretty religious too. The last Shaker commune is in Maine. Only 2 people left. Yeah, exactly, Dale. Which is, I mean, to be fair, not being able to fuck is a pretty good recipe for your movement not having a strong future. So, weren't the Shakers anti-fuck? They weren't the Shakers ant-fucking? Oh man, they weren't allowed to fuck ants. Nobody is. That's just unethical. But also, yeah, the Shakers can't have sex, which is probably why there's only 2 of them left. Horny 1, religious 0. Italy is 1, let's go. Yeah, when I was on my walk today, there were so many, like, Italian flags, like, on people's houses and stuff like that. Like, oh, man. See, I don't particularly give a shit about Italy's soccer team, but I'm just happy that England lost. England losing is one of my favorite things to watch happen. So congratulations on the UK for taking the L, in my mind. Do you plan on doing a video about the coalition of Western states and their constant attempts to form a Christian ethno-state, 54 Militias Alliance? I don't know. But thank you for the super chat, Jail. Zale. What's X-Gen? Just Christian. It's another way of saying it. It's an old way of saying it, actually. My next video is on that series is going to be about Oklahoma City. And then I'm gonna have the finale, which is about the movement after Oklahoma City. Post Oklahoma City, the decline of the white power movement and the militia movement in the late 1990s, and its sort of stagnancy throughout the early 2000s until they had a major resurgence when Barack Obama got elected. So, and that kind of leading into Trump and everything. So that's going to be the last video in the series. Probably going to be a pretty long one. But then the White Power Movement series is going to be over unless something major happens that I need to add on to the end of it. Thoughts on right-wingers politicizing protests? Oh, man, everyone's just coming in and asking the same question about Cuba. I really should have like read more on it. But like I don't know much about the situations going on in Cuba, but I will just say like pretty definitively that yeah, the right is going to definitely try and grab onto it, and no matter how bad the protests are, they're going to exaggerate to make it even worse because they want to justify the U.S. attacking, doing regime change in Cuba, which is like, you know, always the U.S.'s plan. They want to turn, they never forgave Cuba for overthrowing basically U.S. colonization. They were a colony in all but names at that point. And, yeah. Where's the Muldery one today? I like her face and her brain thoughts. She is taking a personal day. She's not here this week. Hopefully she'll be back next week. Some Marxists argue the Digger could never build communism because you need to do industrialization before you can do communism. I mean, okay. I mean, they tried. I don't know. I also don't think that Marx was like a fucking prophet. I think he was a smart political theorist, But I'm not religiously devoted to Marx, so I think that you can explain political economy in a Marxist sense that doesn't dismiss the idea. Like, I don't know. I think it's logical to assume that they could have done something. Thoughts on China right now? What do I think about China? I was thinking about them a bit this morning because I was like thinking about how people who think that there's weird internet communists who think that China is like our last bastion of hope in a cold and dark universe. And it's like, man, is this are these people like they the communist version of the people who say that the Nazis are left-wing because they call themselves the National Socialist Party? Like, can you really say that China's communist when it has so many multi-billion-dollar corporations, it has multiple billionaires and outlaws unions and all this kind of things? It's like man. Former historian, didn't you think that's something that goes away? What was your area? The only reason I would ever say former historian is because the fact that I don't do active publishable history research. But my work was on I was a US historian who focused on the history of communications technology, specifically in regards to the development of the internet. And I was doing a dissertation project when I dropped out on the topic of how the internet and global communications networks reacted to the 9/11 attacks as a way to sort of understand how people thought about how you could almost measure in real time how the narrative about 9/11 was changing moment to moment. That was sort of my that was my topic. It was very wishy-washy, and it was a very vague topic. That's probably why I never really got very far. The streamer said, "Yeah, and I imagine everyone else you're into your partner as well. I at least assume that she has a point, but I can't figure out what she's talking about. I don't know what that means." Oh, you had a part 2. Because you read something earlier. Was talking to a streamer talking about how insane it is to marry someone you don't know if you're sexually capable with or not. And the streamer said, "Yeah, really, and imagine what else you're not looking into but the partner as well. I at least assume she has a point, but I can't figure out what she's talking about." My guess is that, the issues with people getting married without having sex with each other, like the hardcore Christians do. It's not healthy. If people formed communes and cooperatives instead of enclosures, would that industrialization still happen? I couldn't tell you. Possibly. Might not have happened as fast, and it wouldn't have been as brutal. Industrialization without colonization and slavery would have been a much slower process for sure. Probably more sustainable though. It's a shame how 9/11 overshadowed Oklahoma City bombing to such a degree that Americans I talk have no idea about white nationalism involved. People forget their dangers. Yeah, that's what I'm. That's kind of one of the reasons I really want to make this video on Oklahoma City and the militia movement. Well, I kind of already made my video on the militia movement. Now my next video is just going to be about Timothy McVeigh and Oklahoma City, which it's kind of wacky that aside from 9/11, the worst terrorist attack in human history happened in 1995, and a lot of people don't remember it, and it doesn't get talked about very much. Yeah, let's see.
We don't learn about U.S. history past 1865 in high school. Pretty easy to not know things, yeah. Isn't all history former history? I mean, what I said was like, I think that they were going off of was former historian. Because I am probably a former historian. You can call yourself a historian. You can use the skills here to do public engagement. Well, thank you. Yeah, I dropped out of a PhD program, and I probably would say at this point that I'm a public history, like a public historian, I guess is what they're called. My work is definitely more close to what the work of public history is than what capital H historians do. Private history, I guess. I don't know. China's movement towards capitalism and it's abandoning. Yeah, I was about to say, like, I don't know if a communist country would have Meng Huawei as a person in it. I don't know if they need. I don't know if a communist country has like a mobile phone billionaire in it. I don't know. Just got my MA non-thesis in late Ottoman Empire and African American dual fields. That is a unique combination of things. I swear, some people marry someone without realizing they're Republican. Yeah, I remember that I was at a friend's house. This was a few years ago now. They're married now. But they were, like, getting married in just a few months from when we met, or from this time we met up. And the husband kind of just said that he considers himself conservative. And she was like, what the fuck? And they, like, fought for, like, 20 minutes about this. So I was like, oh my god. It was a little weird. Any reason why my favorite leftist YouTubers are all Canadian? The only thing I can think of is that our Overton window on the left is a little bit more... kind of like the reason why there's so many more Canadian content creators in general and so many more Canadian like actors and musicians and stuff like that, that we really punch above our weight in those areas. And that is, we're a country that has similar accents and a similar cultural context to the United States. So it's very easy for stuff that we make to convert to American culture. But at the same time, Canada as a country is slightly more affluent than the United States. So we're more likely to have the equipment to do content. And at the same time, we have a marginally more left-wing Overton window than the United States. So we can think in slightly more left-wing terms here and not be punished for it. And we live in a country where we have, some social democratic reforms that have worked out for us. So we're much more likely to defend those kinds of things. And not to mention that Canada has a strong cultural thing of just gawking at the United States and just like being absolutely floored by how everything is so dysfunctional. And so all those things probably contribute to the fact there's a lot of Canadians who just talk about shit on the internet, like me. Do hunter-gatherers experience famines? Until comparatively recently, like a volcano in Iceland could cause half of Europe to starve. Were hunter-gatherers spared that shit? I mean, no. There could definitely be famines. Droughts lead to, natural plants also having lack of resources. Animals being thinner in number and being smaller in general. So yeah, even famines could cause hunter-gatherers to have starvation issues. Probably be a lot more safe, though, because there's more variety of things that they lived off of, which was good. Like, if you're a farmer and you're living off a single monocrop and some sort of thing happens that caused that crop to fail, you're, like, going to cause mass starvation, while, like, a forager could move to, more and more undesirable food sources in a pinch, but... it would still happen for sure.
it's very likely that it probably did happen at some point because we have this weird genetic bottleneck in the human species where we are very genetically similar to each other, more so than most other animals, which suggests that at some point in the I think it was about 40,000 years ago or so, that something happened that caused our population to mostly die out, and that we're all descendants of like the few survivors. If you're doing this, what else are you not looking into about your partner? Yeah, I guess. I never really grew up in those kinds of spaces. Private history is what the supremacist / MAGA crowd have, where they get to have their own version of history. Fair. Do you think there's like an actor breaking point as like an event that will click over to cause a communist revolution, global or international? To be fair, I don't think such a thing will happen anywhere near like that easy. I don't think it'll happen like everywhere at once. I think if anything, what you're going to see is, I think Mao probably pointed out pretty well that actually like communist revolutions probably won't happen in like the colonial core, right? Like it won't start here. I don't think that, you know, a communist revolution in a place like Canada or the United States is likely to happen soon. But like, I imagine you're probably going to see if like socialist movements that are starting to take off more happening in the more hyper exploited places of the world. These places like for example in South America, where you got there's been some pretty big upsets down there, and I think you're going to see it more and more. It would have to trickle up in that kind of way. I don't know exactly what kind of set of conditions could cause a place like Canada to have a communist revolution at this point. We're still pretty we're still comfortable enough that we're not like at the point where things are breaking enough that we're, you know, thinking of overthrowing the government. But one thing that is becoming more and more obvious, if we're not at that point yet, that it's becoming more and more obvious that meaningful solutions to the problems that we have, that like civil unrest and revolution seems a lot closer than, or a lot more of a realistic option than like, you know, any politician taking any of these things seriously and doing any meaningful reform. Like, which means that, like, you know, while it's not a thing that I don't see coming soon, it's a thing that is more likely than, you know, like a more likely way to get out of the myriad crises that we're in than, like, you know, voting the right person in and getting the laws passed. Broccoli or cauliflower? Broccoli. Love that shit. Canadian all seem to know each other. Well, there's a reason that like a lot of like it seems like a lot of like Canadian. There's a lot of Canadian YouTubers that just live in and around Toronto is the reason. Like, the only like Canadian content creator that I know of who doesn't sort of live in about like a 3-hour bubble around Toronto is the Serfs who live on the West Coast. But like, the reason why we all know each other is because we do actually all know each other, because we're doing meetups in Toronto. Like we were doing there was a time where almost like once a month we were all meeting up in Toronto and hanging out. And like, for example, like I would go out, like Mexi and I would go out, like we would have double dates with Mexi's partner and my wife, and we would go out together and such. Like we all know each other. Canadians are a uniquely socialist country, maybe. Not socialist thing. I wouldn't say that. I think that Canada is politically more to the right than a lot of European countries when it comes to like social democratic reforms. Canada is like unique in that we have a remarkably resilient center. Like, we're in this age where in every country the sort of center is falling apart and the radical right and the radical left are becoming more and more prominent. And Canada's center is like remarkably resilient right now, to the point where our centrist liberals are still winning elections. It's really weird. Cheers, Smite Night. Love your videos. I think you helped me find a way towards an anarchist viewpoint. Thanks for your work. Well, thank you. Much appreciated. I'm glad that I've been able to help you on your journey. What country treated indigenous people the worst? Mexico, USA, or Canada? I don't know if there's... I can't think of, like, what... I mean, the United States has a more, like, overtly violent history. Mexico, too, actually. Mexico had some pretty brutal stuff. Canada, too. That's the thing, is, like, it's hard to say. Both of them are definitely horror stories in their own special way. Humanity being one giant incest pile does explain our track record. Oh boy. Let's see. Again, you could be worse. You could be my mom and never have a long-term relationship with someone that's not ultra-conservative because they're the ones with the money. Oof. That's uncomfortable. It was the roughly 70,000 years ago extinction, said to have brought us down to 20,000, 50 females capable of childbearing. That's insane. Holy crap. Yeah, I think there was like this theory that I don't think it's ever been borne out, and I think that we're actually kind of moving away from it. But there was this hypothesis, I guess you would say, that it was caused by a volcano called Toba exploding, and basically like making it so that like a lot of plants died out at that period. But I think the better answer is that we don't know right now what caused that massive die out roughly 70,000 years ago. Hi from Prescott, Arizona. Well, hello. Cancer is a lie. Wow, okay. That's a fun one. Latin America is a big focal point for where communist revolution is likely. Oh, Smite Night, I don't know if you're still in the chat here, but you try to get a Discord invitation, and I haven't done a Discord I haven't put a Discord link in the chat in a little while, so I probably should. I haven't done that in a little while. We can get that going. We definitely have one, so I'll put that in the chat. Okay. Let's see. Dan Olson does live in Alberta. Yes, that's true. And I think also Sarah Zed is in Alberta somewhere as well, but... But, like, there's a lot of us in Toronto. Like, a lot of us. Like, Sage from Just Right, Jose, Thought Slime, myself, Maxi, We're in Hell... and that's just like a few people off the top of my head who are all YouTubers who live in Toronto or the Toronto area. In fact, all of them except me live in Toronto, and I think Maxi kind of lives outside of the city, and I live about 2 hours out of Toronto. I remember I
said that a giant wetland area that was accidentally created by monks digging in the peat. Should conservationists want to protect places that have, even though they're technically not natural? I think that, yeah, I think so. Like, the idea of, like, everything must be preserved as nature intended is sort of like a romantic, wishy-washy idea of restorative ecology that's not based on how most ecologists and most people who do like I know people who do wildlife rehabilitation or what's it called, like ecological rehabilitation, and that's not the way they think at all. That's how, like, people on the internet who don't do that kind of work think. Are the few present-day hunter-gatherers a useful rubric for understanding how our ancestors lived? Given that they were pushed to the geographic perimeters of colonialism in the inhabited world? I mean, they're not perfect, obviously, but they are a way to understand some ways that we might have lived. Yeah. There is, there is something to learn, but, like, it would be silly to say that it's exactly that way. It's not that the liberals are winning. Conservatives just can't get their act together and move to have a competent leader. Well, there's that, but also the conservatives in Canada are still very much married to the idea that, like, culture war issues and, like, social conservative stuff is not a winning thing for them. And also, the Conservative Party has an issue, which is that Canada's far right is sort of split linguistically, and the two factions hate each other. Like, Canada's far right is made up of people typically in Alberta and in Quebec, and the people in those two groups hate each other. So our, like, far right isn't very well organized either. Then also, like, there's some resilience against the far right because we have, like, hate speech laws and stuff like that. So, like, people, like, far right influencers get banned from the country, and like people who have, like, hateful rhetoric usually get their books banned from being sold and stuff. Which revolution in history do you think was the most revolutionary, i.e. affected the most change in the world? I'd say either Russia or France. The French Revolution was huge and really set off, like, a lot of the really big changes that happened in the late 18th, early 19th century. And the Russian Revolution is probably, like, you know, pretty big influencer on our world today, so. What monarchy is most likely to be on the chopping block? We'll see what happens. You know, I'm very curious about what happens when Queen Elizabeth dies. That'll be interesting. I find communism too confusing, so I go with socialism because I at least understand that a little bit, while being open to anarcho-communism. How long do I do that before it becomes a problem? I mean, eventually, like, what's it called? Like, a lot of these words have had their meanings absolutely butchered by Cold War politics and stuff like that. But I would recommend reading more books and having a better understanding of different words so you can figure out what works for you. I imagine that you're going to be a comrade on most of our efforts for a pretty long time at this point. Do you consider someone like you an ally? Yes, I am, as a leftist who has been around long enough to know what it was like before 2015 when we got, like, a huge influx in numbers. That when you're on the left, every ally that you can get counts, and that
We should focus on things that we agree on rather than like fighting each other over doctrinal differences. Except for social democrats, because they're just liberals who feel guilty. They want to like somehow keep capitalism despite they're like what's it called? Social democrats are like the ones who think that we can have an economy designed for exploitation and dominance and inequality and destruction, and that we can make it equal if we just put the right things in place, you know? It's like, listen, if we just find ways, what's it called? If we just find the right fire suppression system, we can both have our arson machine and a house. It'll be fine. If we just put in sprinkler systems and, you know, put fire extinguishers in every room, then we can have our arson machine and our house and we'll be fine. While socialists are like, maybe we should get rid of the arson machine. I'd appreciate a video addressing the sovereign citizens movement, especially the part where others claim... Actually, that'd be very interesting. I think I should... sovereign citizens would be a good one. I'm going to write that down. I need scrap paper. I need more scrap paper in my life. Okay. What is this? Okay. This should work. Sovereign citizens are a good one. I found out that sovereign citizens kill more cops than pretty much any other political group, so very curious about hear more about them. And also, isn't Wesley Snipes one? Especially when there's more and more people to experience a sort of separation. I was a national park ranger here in the state, and the mission for ecological improvement is to minimize modern environmental effects. Yeah, they're just talking about a marsh that was cleared by like freaking like medieval monks and turned into a lake. Why can't farmers switch to other food sources in hard times like foragers do? Typically because capitalist industrialized farmers have, like, when you want to grow a crop for a farming season, you have to have all that shit planned out like months in advance. Yeah, crop failure can destroy an entire year's work. That's why farmers today have crop insurance and stuff like that. So you could, but it'll definitely happen a lot slower. And there will be pretty lean times in the meantime. Haitian Revolution changed race relations too. That's true. Yeah, maybe I should do that. I should do a Haitian Revolution video when I get to 100K. Right now, I'm doing like all candy videos right now. Like all videos that I have like a pretty good idea will do good numbers because I'm really, really, really trying to push to step back to 100K. Like I'm close to 96K right now. So I want that last 4,000 subscribers so I can get to 100K and get my play button and stuff. Once that's done, I'm going to be like way less invested in making sure that like every video has to be a guaranteed successful video. And I can do more stuff that's like, you know, more heavy history focused, and like I can do stuff like the Haitian Revolution and a bunch of other videos I've been planning on doing that I just have put on the side or put on ice because it's like, no, I need to do something like super fucking... optimized to get views. Oh, I didn't know that there were cancer truthers. I'm gonna get rid of this guy. No, thank you. Don't really want people who don't believe in cancer in my chat. Smite Knight, thank you for the one for the tier 1 subscription. Appreciated. All right, let's see. Where was my chat? There we are. Love your video on the Vietnam veterans. Will there be a part 2? I'm eager to know more. My video on the Vietnam veterans was the beginning of a series that now has 7 videos in it. I can't say your name because it's in Cyrillic, but I will post a link in the chat to a playlist, a 7-video playlist on the Vietnam veterans. So, yeah. You've got it. Just hold on tight. Content coming your way. There we go. My mother and I are the arson machines of the family. Oh no. I'm done with dogmatism. I guerrilla garden in front of a homeless camp and was able to have a conversation with someone completely against communism where they ended up completely agreeing with me. That's pretty rad. There's a house I pass by every day that does something pretty cool where they have like a little herb garden with a sign that basically says like, hey, clip yourself off some leaves, have some herbs. And I was like, oh, that's nice. There's so many, like, I live in like this sort of like weird mix of, I live in this neighborhood that has this like mix of rental units but also of like people who single family homes. And there's so many like mixes of, because it's like they're all old houses too. So many like mixes of like different types of people, and it's a university town. So like there's so many like random like there's great like lawns, like there's lawn signs everywhere about different causes. Lots of really cool raised bed gardens in their front yards, and like, you know, programs for giving away food. And it's like, oh man, like I found my people. But they're like but also like mixed around with like surprisingly nice houses by people who obviously have money. And so it's like, oh yeah, this is academia. This is professors' houses or whatever. The other day, Vosh debated an Assad chemical attack denialist. Is there any point in debating a conspiracy theorist? Not really. It seems like they can always like point to some obscure. Oh, this is why I don't really care for this Vosh guy. He kind of just platforms anybody who has any shitty opinions and lets them have the time of day, which I am not a fan of. Not a fan of a lot of things. He's also, it seems like he's getting more and more like makes excuses for U.S. Imperialist foreign policy and shit that I'm not super happy with. The Oka crisis. That is another one I said I would do. How did I get so many ideas? Oka crisis would be a good one. My next video that I'm going to start working on tomorrow probably is going to be on the residential school system, so I'm pretty excited. Do you know of the baby scoop era? One of the craziest modern events to happen. It empowers conservatives in the U.S. pre and post it happening. Reagan made women keeping babies out to be welfare queens. What? Happened in Canada too. I don't know. Like, what do you... The baby scoop era? Is this like the... If it's Reagan, it must have been the 80s. Am I a baby scoop? Whatever that is. Appeared in the Anglosphere starting after the end of World War II and ending in the early 70s. Characterized by an increased rate in premarital pregnancies over the preceding period, along with a higher rate of newborn adoption. Oh. Interesting. So that's not me. Huh. Interesting. When 100,000 unplanned pregnant. So people had a lot of babies, but they were not married. Huh. I guess it's not that big a deal though. All right. Old school subsistence farmers. Yeah, that's the thing is like if you have a crop that fails, like by the time you know that it's failed, you've already invested so much in your field that starting over probably means you're not going to be able to get the yield that you want by the end of the summer, and you're still going to have a severe food deficit. And also, famine usually means things like droughts and bad weather, which is going to be bad for most crops. Like, when you get when you're a hunter-gatherer type society, what happens during times of famine is you start finding new and unusual forms of sustenance that is typically unpleasant. That's when you start eating like organs, or they eat organs all the time in the UK, but also in like the world. But like they start finding like new, unusual sources of meat, and also things like hunter-gatherers in times of famine can also just leave the region and go somewhere where it's nicer, while a farmer cannot. We have little mini libraries that here in Parry Sound. Take a book, leave a book free. Hey, you live in Parry Sound? I used to go there all the time. My uncle has a cottage up by... What's that place called? Otter Lake. It's a lake in northern Ontario where my uncle has a cottage. It's around Parry Sound. So when I was a very little boy, I used to go up there every so often, like probably like once a summer for about a week. Aren't you afraid of losing your beloved viewership count that believes in alternative facts? Oh boy. No, the thing is, if I get to 100K, I get my thing, but then like I feel like I have like growing my channel is a thing that I think will happen still. It's just that I'm not going to be like super pushy like pressure to try and get like the most amount of views and the most amount of subscribers possible, because I kind of got my goal when the goal that I set out to do 6 years ago is to get to 100K, and I got there. USA climate refugees, how will farmers do? It's a good question. I can't remember who said it, but somebody said that just arguing with them gives their arguments exposure. Yeah, anytime I think about like people who let like conspiracy theorists and neo-Nazis and stuff like that come onto their channel to quote-unquote debate, I always just point out that there's this very high-profile event that happened in the UK where a BNP leader and like basically like actual fucking neo-Nazi was brought on to a talk show to kind of talk about politics and such. And the general consensus in like the British media and to British people is that he came on and absolutely ruined his reputation and the party's reputation by being absolutely awful. Being terrible at organizing, at looking like a complete buffoon, but the BNP still experienced a like huge recruitment bonus by him just being on TV and having his ideas broadcast. So, yeah. Seems like out of our gardening plans this year, we didn't do raised beds, which fucked us over. And it seems like we're just going to get some zucchinis and that's it. Why can't subsistence farmers switch to gathering in hard times? They definitely could have, yeah. But also, foraging type economies, like foraging type peoples, require, like, to become a forager, you have to have a pretty sophisticated, like, education. Like, people who lived in hunter-gatherer societies had a lot of received knowledge from their ancestors about, you know, what plants are safe, how to hunt certain types of animals, different ways, all sorts of, like, information. And, like, when you farm, you know, very quickly you lose a lot of those skills. And so they wouldn't have had the same sort of ability to survive in the same way. Let's see. Why are there Assad chemical attack denialists who claim to be on the left? Because there are some people who interpret being on the left as being on the side of anybody who the U.S. opposes. So everybody who's against the United States is your friend, no matter what their politics are or what they're doing. And the same type of people are also the type of people who believe that literally everybody who they disagree with is the CIA, and any reality that they don't like, also the CIA and propaganda. So they will. So in their mind, Assad, because he was anti-America, was a good guy, no matter what, and therefore, any, you know, gas attack or anything like that had to have been just CIA propaganda. That's all. That's the only answer. Forget all the evidence. Forget all of the independent reports that show that there was definitely attacks on their own people. Just ignore. Just, you know, just double down. Thoughtsign brought me to your channel, and I've been going through your video with great enthusiasm. Thank you. One more for your road to 100K. Well, thank you very much, Slayer of Cats. Much appreciated. I am glad to have an undead warlock as my as a viewer of mine. I've been listening to an audiobook of Settlers by Jay Sakai, and it has me big mad. The wild contrast between U.S. history presented by whites versus reality is jaw-dropping. Yup. Gotta check that book out. Zucchini, aka Italian cucumbers. Oh God. What do you think will take the serfs to realize they shouldn't be platforming Nazis by debating them? I don't know. It's the thing about platforming these people is that it's also big views, because there's a pretty toxic trend in leftist YouTube, which is that debunking the right, basically letting the right control the conversation and focusing your efforts on, like, showing right-wing arguments and then making fun of them or whatever is very, very popular content. I tried it once when I made a response to PragerU, and it was one of my most popular videos I ever made. And I felt gross about it because I gave PragerU attention. And I don't know how to fix that problem, because in my mind, it means that we're always on a reactionary footing, that we're thinking we're letting the right completely control the conversation, and that is a sign that they are winning. And like, that's not how we, you know, make change. That's not how we do cool stuff. But if you're, you know, chasing what works and you're trying to get views and those kinds of things, then like I'm very much sure that, like, I don't know how Lance feels about platforming or anything like that, but I think he does have, like, an idea that he has issues of substance that he cares about and he talks about on his streams. But also he knows that he needs what he refers to as candy, which is like stuff that he knows is just going to bring in the views. And he tries to strike a balance of those things. But I'm trying to make the argument that, sugar gives you the beatus. Am I ever going to do a video on the metabolic rift, or is that outside of my interest? Metabolic rift. This is new to me. Interesting. I want to make a video about big ape theory or something like that. That this idea that like a lot of the physiological differences between men and women actually can stem to like almost like long-term like misogyny. Like women got less food than men did, and that like caused the dimorphism of them to be smaller and being less physically imposing, which reimposed like patriarchal power structures. And it's like, oh my god, interesting. Because humans are kind of weirdly sexually dimorphic compared to our fellows of our species. How was TS dressed at your last D&D game? There was no cameras on. It was just video. It was just audio. Any life advice for an incoming grad student? Write every day. Treat it like it's a job instead of like school. I think that like the number one thing that a lot of people have issues with when they become grad students is that they think the workload's going to be like university and that you can treat it like university, when like you should probably treat it like a job. Like start like in the sense that like don't like think of things as like independent projects. Always be working on stuff. And because like the amount of writing and the amount, depending upon the course you're in too, they can be very different. But in my case, the amount of writing and the amount of reading I had to do was so much more than it was in undergrad, that if I wasn't like, there was no chance to like, do the readings very fast like the day before. You had to be doing them all week. And like, the papers were long enough that you couldn't just like write it like the day before. You'd have to like take like a whole weeks to do it, and you'll just be a lot less stressed if you spread out your work. And so that's the way I would think of it. Did Assad kick the bucket? As far as I know, he hasn't. Thou art a corrupted soul, unworthy of the best. Oh, God. Which do you think is growing faster, leftist on Twitch or leftist on YouTube? It seems to me at these days that it's Twitch. Leftist on YouTube seems to... I think YouTube in general as a platform is sort of losing its cultural cachet. And so I mean, there are some new faces coming into the realm, which is nice. But YouTube seems to have a more like pyramid-shaped thing. So like, it seems like leftists on YouTube, like there are a few big names, and they seem to be pretty entrenched. And to sort of enter into the big leagues, like I haven't seen a new leftist YouTuber who has really made a name for themselves out of nowhere in a few years now, which shows that like it seems that like it's getting harder and harder for new channels to really take off. Maggie May Fish, who's like also like a movie reviewer, not like really like a leftist politics YouTuber, is like the only one that I can think of right now. And even then, she has a pre-established thing of coming from Cracked and such. So Like there's a lot more YouTubers who are rising to the top who are YouTubers who happen to be leftists but have completely different, like, their channels are about different things. That's a more likely thing. I'm a new viewer. Is his brother a fellow Muslim? I am not a Muslim. I am an agnostic person. But I have done a lot of work in my life. Like my master's thesis was on Islamophobia and like the Islamic world and Islam in general are interests of mine. I have read books about them and such. Isn't Lance one of the biggest leftists on Twitch? Does he really need more views? I think that he's... I don't know what his strategy is, but that's what I'm guessing. But there are people who do think that platforming fascists leads to de-radicalization, which, like, is something that is, like, debatable, ironically. But I don't know if it's something that, like, I imagine that Lance and I would probably have disagreements about the negative effects of platforming these kinds of people. But that's just me. Oh, wow, thank you. Just looking over your titles on Muslim videos, and I was very delighted to see their leftist content raising awareness of Islamophobia. My pleasure. Yeah, it's a pretty big part of my career. I wonder if Thought Slim's going to get shit for continuing to occasionally present as masculine in videos. I know there's some transphobes that think you have to make more of an effort to constantly present as feminine for it to count. But I mean, like, he's non-binary. And, like, he's like, what's it called? He's just, like, what's it called? He's, like, just playing around with different things and they're, like, fluid. I don't see why there's any problem. I don't know. Like, I literally texted him at one point to be like, hey, D&D's coming up, like, what would you like us to call you by? Those kinds of things. And he said he didn't care. It's like, you can call me whatever you want, I don't care. And it's like, okay. Is leftism growing on TikTok at all? Are the kids getting hyped to marks? Leftism is, I mean, there is, like, definitely a lot of leftist content on TikTok, and that makes me happy. So yes, the answer is yes. Leftist political channels grow and they gain momentum and consume the space smaller new channels would get. Yeah, maybe. YouTube as a platform is growing all the time too, so I don't exactly know why new big channels have, like, not really, like, broken in. I imagine they would. It's just, like, I think that a lot of people who are, like, getting into making content as leftists now are going into different places than YouTube, is the thing. Why do I keep thinking you're an atheist? I mean, I'm not religious, and, like, atheist is not, like, the most wrong position to say that I am, because, like, if, you know, gun to my head, do you believe in God? I'd say probably not. I call myself an agnostic because, one, I wish to distance myself from new atheists, and, like, the Richard Dawkins and, like, the asshole types. Two, I think that it's pretty important to establish the philosophical position of agnosticism, that it really is impossible to prove whether or not a God exists. Like, it's really not, like, there is no way to definitively say one or the other, so it's not super important to me to answer it. And in my mind, I fall under a kind of branch called apatheism, which is the idea that whether or not a God exists shouldn't really matter for the way that we think and act. It's really not a thing that we can answer anyway, so why bother thinking about it? So that kind of stuff, to me, whether or not a God exists doesn't matter to me and the way that I would think about things.
But for the most part, it's to kind of distance myself from the sort of bigoted reactionary movement that has that atheism sort of moved into. And yeah. So Orthodox with leftism for a while. It's sad that even Muslims know about how, yeah. I was about to say, yeah, there is some pretty, like, the Zakat in general has some very leftist underpinnings to it. Why do you use the he pronoun if he prefers they them? Literally, his every single thing he says any and all, and if he had an issue with it, he would have brought it up with me, and he never has. So I just go by, in that case, like literally, I just go by the pronouns that I just know. So I don't think he's ever once ever said that he prefers they them pronouns. And in many ways, he seems to not give a shit about what pronouns you use for him. Just like I said, I asked what name he preferred for our D&D game, and he literally said, like, whatever, I don't care. It's like, okay. Whatever works for you. It's a very easygoing person. Why are young Israelis so right-wing? The right has pretty strong dominance over Israeli political culture. I imagine there's probably a more nuanced answer, but the fact is just they're steeped in a lot of right-wing propaganda in that country. Yeah. But other than that, like, I'm not an expert on Israeli culture, so I couldn't really answer. Find that most trans people are fine with you for your equal rights if you try to remember to call them by the right pronouns. Yeah. But, like, trust me, like, on the pronouns thing, like, if he told me to, if he expressed any preference for any name or pronouns, I would use them. I would, he's a very close friend of mine, very important to me, and I support any expression that he wishes to have. And so, yeah. If it wasn't for the Electoral College, would the Republican Party be more like the Tory parties in our countries? Maybe. If there wasn't for the Electoral College, the Republicans probably wouldn't even be a political party by this point because they wouldn't have won an election since George Bush Sr. I just got here after a long time not participating. All I heard was, I'm agnostic. What's Tristan talking about? Oh, somebody said I was an atheist is all. Gad, though, we got a question recently about whether about Israelis being, why are Israelis so right wing, and I don't know what the answer is. But you are Israeli leftists. Explaining why young Israelis are so right wing could be an in-depth hour-long video. Fair, yeah, that makes sense. Calling yourself to an agnostic to distance yourself from the skeptics is actually not a bad strategy. And God, it's the same when they go, not a real Christian if they're pro-LGBT. It's not only like it's for distancing, and also like it's just more intellectually honest to call myself an agnostic. And then I honestly more often call myself an apatheist, which is that I just don't particularly care whether or not God exists or any sort of deity exists. I mean, theoretically, I guess. Is there a cat? Like my religion, like
if a god exists, it's like, the programmers of the simulation or something. Praise Basthead. Pet your cat. Do we have a cat? I didn't think there was a cat in this room. Am I going insane? But if it wasn't for the Electoral College, wouldn't they have to moderate somewhat? Yeah, probably, if they wanted to stay relevant, I guess. F? Stream's still up. Don't think my cats are in my office. How many cats do you have? I have 2. But I closed the door to my office when I started streaming, so I don't think there are any cats in here. Oh man, let's see if we got any more questions. When speaking of crazed, excessively impulsive, and downright insane sports addicts, I couldn't help but be reminded of something like the 10-cent beer night in Cleveland, Ohio. Have you ever heard of the event? If you haven't, I'd love your reaction. I personally can't help you but find it laughable. 10-cent beer night, let's see. 10-cent beer night was a promotion held by Major League Baseball's Cleveland Indians during a game against the Texas Rangers in Cleveland Stadium on Tuesday, June 4th, 1974. The idea of the promotion was to attract more fans to a game by offering 12 fluid ounces cups of beer, 3.2% beer, for just 10 cents each. A substantial discount on the regular price of 65 cents, with a limit of 6 beers per purchase, with no limit on the number of purchases made during the game. During the game, fans became heavily intoxicated, culminating in a riot in the 9th inning, which caused the game to be forfeited due to the crowd's uncontrollable rowdiness and because the game could not be resumed in a timely manner. Yeah. That's pretty good. I'm not gonna lie. Are they cool cats? Yeah, they're cool cats. Tay again. How come you hate England? Because England is a... what's it called? England is a... Or what's it called? Has caused so much misery on the world by colonizing and brutalizing indigenous peoples, committing genocides of the people who live there, and all that kind of stuff. Like, England was like the king of conquering the world and subjugating people for centuries. It's like... I mean, Italy invented fascism and got up some bullshit, but it's just nice to see the old empire lose. Freemasons are still a thing. I think they only existed in novels about the Illuminati. Yeah, they still exist. They're like a club for old men to do charity and to play cards and drink, basically. They have a lot of trouble getting new recruits, so it's really just an organization of old men. My great-grandfather was a Freemason. I think one of my great-grandfathers on my mother's side was a Freemason, and my grandfather on my father's side was a Freemason. So, but like, yeah, it's mostly an organization of just like old dudes who get together to play cards, drink a little bit, and then occasionally they go to they do charity events and stuff like that. That's really about it. It's so full of old people who have, and it's so full of like, it's so hard to get new members now that there's like nothing. Hey, Britain, how do you get so many artifacts in your museums? Yeah. The UK is like the world's largest open-air crime scene. I think Italy is the older empire, the SPQR. Oh, God, yeah. Wow, proof that you are part of conspiracy. I should find it sometime. I definitely should use it for a video. But one of the things that I got when I don't remember when I got this, but at one point, I inherited, even though my great grandfather died in like 1985, like 3 years before I was born. Somehow I got his Mason ring, and I have it, and I have it somewhere. I think it's like in a box in our bedroom with like the jewelry. But yeah, like I have his old Mason ring. It's got like the little, the compass and the thing and the G. And I remember when I was like a teenager, I thought it was really cool, and I wore it like one day, and some bakery, a guy who ran a bakery, tried to ask me like the secret code or whatever, to like kind of say, oh, like fellow Mason. And then when I didn't know what was going on, I said it was just my grandfather's ring, and it was like, oh. And I never wore it again. It wasn't the handshake. They apparently, for a Mason to meet another Mason, or if you think somebody else is a Mason, you ask, how's your mother? And there's apparently a correct answer to that. That's like confirming that this guy's another Mason. That's about it, though. Did you know Mormons copied a lot of their rituals from the Masons? Okay. The Masons were a much bigger deal back in the 19th century, obviously. My family were part of a similar group called Rotary, and somehow still believe the Freemason conspiracies. Yeah, Rotary is a pretty similar organization to the Freemasons. What's it called? I used to. I did this multiple years in a row, but there was this program that Rotary ran, where they were funding a few kids every year to live with like a host family in another country. And you could do a year abroad while in high school. And I didn't get it 2 years in a row, so I gave up. But but it was run by Rotary, so I almost took Rotary money to spend a year in like Europe or something. Who knows what my life would have been like if I had done that. What do I think one-party Democratic rule since 1992 would be like? Good question. Probably the Democratic Party would have become corrupt for being in power for like nearly 30 years, and probably would have split off into another party, or it would have probably the Republicans might have just somehow won on like just rising corruption in the Democratic Party. And at that point, like what's it called? History's changed so much at that point. Then you have no idea what would have happened. How's your mother's a reference to their pagan beliefs revolving around the Virgin Mary, which tracks to the roots of the Templar sect. So I just decided, okay, interesting. The Democratic Party are not corrupt now. Well, I mean, like in a much more traditional sense. Like anytime a single political party stays in power for long periods of time and doesn't really have competitive elections, you get like much more like, old school corruptions, like taking bribes and giving contracts to their friends and stuff like that. Like our Liberal Party, or like what happened with what's his name, the now former leader of Israel, who looks like he's going to go to jail just because he was like doing all sorts of underhanded shit. It just happens when you have single party rule for a long time. The party gets like gets like corrupt in a much more lazy way, a much more direct way. Yeah, Bibi Netanyahu. Like you'd have more cases of like Democratic politicians like giving their sons jobs and stuff like that. Don't look. Yeah, definitely state level American politics. Yeah, fair. I know that. Like, I'm not saying anything new. Obviously, but like it would have been much bigger. It would have been much bigger and much worse, I guess is what I should be saying. Yes, I know that the Democratic Party is relentlessly corrupt. Actually, the Republican Party is relentlessly corrupt. It's just like, what's it called? I was just trying to state a phenomenon that happens when a single party is in power for a long period of time is you end up with corruption. You end up with a lot of corruption and like direct profiteering. So you would probably, after 30 years of Democratic control of the White House, you would have a president that was doing some like kind of like Donald Trumpy type stuff of like giving positions to friends and stuff like that. Who's more qualified to be president, Donald or Ivanka? Wow, what a choice. I mean, Ivanka maybe. She probably would be like, you can't do much worse than how bad Donald Trump did. I feel like Ivanka at least has maybe like a little bit more control over her, like, rapid ego, and like would at least like, probably still has horrible like gargoylish fucking political positions, but would at least be like kind of competent at her job, theoretically, more than a person who like was like literally falling apart the entire presidency. Do you think the presidential turnover in Israel will actually work? I find it hard to believe the right-wing side of the coalition will honor the deal. I don't know. I can't really say too much about Israeli politics. I don't think American politics will be that different after 30 years of Democratic rule. Dems and GOPs aren't that different. Both protect capitalist interests. That's true. But single party rule usually means that you don't even have to win elections, which changes the formula somewhat. What do you think your plan to attach stone gargoyles to every building once capitalism and states are destroyed? Well, it's just good luck. Yeah, the, what's it called? Neo-Gothic style will be very much in vogue. We gotta establish the, like, what is it called? The Gothic language, or the Neo-Gothic language, so that Warhammer 40k can have their the language they speak then. Yeah. All Israeli parties are sort of right-wing, yeah. Neo-Gothic anarchism, there you go. I think I met that person. She was at one of our, I think the last meetup we did before COVID kind of shut it down. There was a woman who was like a turbo goth who came to the event. And I had a very long conversation about like being goth and such. And one of the things I asked is like, so like if you just like are going across the street to go get like an iced tea from the corner shop, you'll goth up. And she said she does. Said she puts on the leather and the spikes and the makeup just to go across the street, and I was like, that's fucking dedication to the art there, lady. That was fun. It was a fun meetup. Would the U.S. be doing better on social issues like abortion and LGBT rights if the country was perpetually dominated by the Democrats? Probably, maybe marginally, yeah. In many ways, like a lot of these issues, like abortion and LGBT rights, were more an issue because the conservative side of the U.S. political spectrum had been actively instigated to getting up into frothing anger. That's been done by Republican operations. And like in the 1970s, people didn't really give a shit about Roe v. Wade. And abortion being legal really wasn't like a hot issue until like almost a decade later. And it was only like really like, like it was actively stoked by conservatives who wanted to use it to win elections. So it's very likely that if you didn't have to deal with like those kinds of political issues, then yeah, they would just be less intense, I guess. That goth girl had like she had like a jacket that had like actual metal spikes on it. That was intense. Goths are fun. Every metalhead needs a goth friend. Yeah. I don't think the political parties are really doing much. For real change, we need a major focus on education reform. Both parties hold back education to maintain power. That's pretty true. I just heard a cat sneeze, so there is most definitely a cat in here somewhere. I don't know where, though. We got about 2 more minutes left of the stream, so let's see what we can do. I mean, there's leftist opposition everywhere. Yeah. Best happy praised, yeah. I don't know where he is. Probably hanging out in the windowsill or something. The cat's gonna pop out right at the end, yeah. Probably go get him. I bet I know where he is. Let me find out. Buddy! Okay, never mind. He is in the closet. I have a closet like right there, and he's like all the way at the back. And to get into the closet, I would need to move the light, and it's a kind of really tight closet. So, and you have to like bend over to get in, so I'm not gonna bother. Would you try to publicly renounce your leftism if the country you lived in was about to be taken over by a fascist dictator? I mean, I would hope that I would not need to do that. I'd probably, I'd probably try to leave and go somewhere else, to be honest. Hey, thank you for the $5 super chat, Daniel. I don't often have a chance to donate to you, but I love your work, so here. Well, thank you. Much appreciated. Helps the bills get paid. Tell Romeo he's to be honest about his sexuality. Oh, boy. Give him some love for us. He seems to be taking a nap on my old green screen, so he seems to be doing all right. It's because I have the door closed, so he can't get out. Because like he'd probably be hanging out on the bed or something if he had a choice. All right, how are we doing on time? We've got about 30 seconds left, so let's start looking for somebody to raid. All right. The person with the least views. It's either going to be Hassan or Bad Bunny. I guess you can raid Bad Bunny. I don't know what's going on with her, but I don't really look into Twitch drama, so I don't care. Anyways, everybody, I'll be back tomorrow night. Take care of yourselves, take care of each other, be good, be kind, and I'll see you all tomorrow. Let me just yeah. Peace.